He was Samson strong and lightning quick, and because he was ambidextrous, goalies never knew from which side he would launch the puck. He played when most Americans couldn't name the 6 teams that made up the NHL. Because long before Wayne Gretzky globalized the game, Gordie Howe put it on the map.
North American hockey was a game that combined skill and toughness, and certainly Gordie, on top of all his skills and toughness, was a dirty player and was admired for it.
At the time he was playing, the great scorers were not giant men, and almost every one of them needed a protector, except Gordie Howe. He protected himself. The people who liked him, the people who rooted for him, said that Gordie never instigated a fight, but he was the greatest retaliator who ever lived. He had the most educated elbows in hockey.
I'd gone up to Eddie Shack, and I told him he was doing a pretty good job looking after Gordie Howe. And I said, keep doing the same thing. And I said, if he starts giving you a rough time, I'm going to be right there tonight.
And all of a sudden, I turn around, and there's Louis got the gloves off, Gordie's got the gloves off, and away they went.
He took a run at Gordie. He didn't know that Gordie had seen him out of the side of his eye. As Louis got next to him, Gordie turned and hit him flush in the nose. Knocked him dead cold. Smeared him.
Life magazine got a picture of it. Lou's nose was on his left cheek. Gashed here from uppercuts. Gordie said the next day, you know, my knuckle hurts. I wonder what happened last night.
When I said to Gordie, why did you sneak punch Fortunato? He said, sneak punch? He was coming up on me from behind. He didn't know that I had seen him. I didn't sneak punch him. He just wasn't ready for me.
Gordie didn't go out of his way ever to just arbitrarily hurt people. That wasn't Gordie's M.O. But if he felt a sense of injustice, that anger and that rage and that sense of, I'm going to make sure that there is a sense of order here, took over.
He can be cruel. I've seen him be vicious on the ice. I've seen him hurt people.
I'm parked right in front there is Hawchuck, and I'm waiting for Doug Harvey to shoot the puck. And Mr. Howe broke my nose. My nose was straight. It went from left to right, about to the cheekbone. And he said to me, he says, kid, he says, in this league, you got to keep your head up.
My first game was against Detroit. I made a pass, I'm watching my pretty pass, and I turn, all of a sudden I'm on the ice. Gordie came across, and he gave me a heck of a shot.
I was 17 years old. He was going down the ice, and I lifted up his stick, and I took the puck. I'm skating along, and all of a sudden I feel this like this, and I turned around, and he said, don't ever embarrass me on the ice. And I had a cracked thumb, and I said, never again.
We played one another 14 times. That was the schedule. So if there's any animosity whatsoever, I didn't have to get him now. I could get him later.
Howe not only prevailed, he endured for 32 seasons over 5 decades, dominating a sport longer than any player in the 20th century. His 1,850 points are the second highest in NHL history.
Gordie Howe played the entire game, the complete game. He would make more instinctively correct moves in one game than players would do in 3 months.
I was immediately struck by how fluid he was, how graceful he was. Gordie scored goals, transitioning from a right-hand shot to a left-hand shot. This manual dexterity for a man his size was just incredible.
Lou Boudreau was a friend of his. He went to the ballpark with the Indians. He said to Boudreau, I can hit Major League pitching. Boudreau says, you can't. He said, I'll have one of my better pitchers throw to you. The third ball the guy threw to Gordie, Gordie hit it almost out of the stadium. He was a specimen.
Underneath his combative athleticism, Howe was a paragon of manly virtue, warm, courteous, and kind, in the sedate precincts umpired by Emily Post.
He'll come off after the game and shake hands with your wife, be very gracious, and the women go away saying, "Is that the same guy I saw out there just pommeling some guy a few minutes ago?"
Hockey players, most of them were farm boys from Canada. They had no great ideas that they were famous. They come in the National Hockey League, they have no great pretenses. Gordie represented a simple farm boy who had been blessed with an ability to play hockey.
The factory workers, the people that 9-to-5 jobs, really took a liking to him. He was just one of them. He treated them just the same way.
While Howe's unpretentious personality fit well in the Motor City, his rival Maurice the Rocket Richard enjoyed a similar intimacy in Montreal. Together, they carried the sport.
Him and Rocket, every building they went, just forget about it. I mean, people went banana when they see those two guys.
Rocket Richard was the hero of what a kid wanted to play hockey. You saw more Montreal jerseys on the outdoor rinks in Ontario, Western Canada for years. Later on, you saw Red Wing jerseys on these rinks outdoors because of number 9 Detroit.
The power of the Howe-Richard rivalry was also being felt in the U.S., and never more noticeably than on the night in 1963 when Gordie passed his foe with his 545th goal.
McNeil coming up over the line. A pass to Howe. A shot. Score! Howe picks the lower corner, and there it is.
A 20-minute ovation symbolized Howe's preeminence in hockey. In 1967, the NHL doubled its ranks, adding 6 new teams from the U.S. The sport had found its place below the border, but Mr. Hockey might not have ignited this growth had he not survived a near-fatal injury 17 years earlier.
SportsCentury's 50 Greatest Athletes is presented by Seville STS with all the power and technology of the North Star system. It's what's next. Also brought to you by Burger King. When you have it your way, it just tastes better. By 10-10-321. Now just 8 cents a minute for calls over 10 minutes. And by Lincoln Financial Group. Lincoln Financial Group. Clear solutions in a complex world.
In Game 1 of the 1950 Stanley Cup playoffs against Toronto, Gordie Howe crashed into the boards and didn't get up.
He went after Teeter Kennedy behind the net. As he did, he hit his head on the boards and was laying on the ice. He could get hurt sometimes and nobody would ever know the difference, but this time he was really seriously hurt.
They shaved his head because they knew the fluid had gone from the base of the spine, but they weren't sure whether his skull had hemorrhaged.
It was a grave situation, and we didn't know. We prayed like hell. I'm not a church-going man, but I learned how to pray.
I actually thought, you know, the way things were going, that he was going to die. The radio was just blaring about this accident. When we came into the room, his head was all bandaged, his eye was all bandaged. He's only got the one eye peeking out. And of course, Mom took his hand. He says, "Oh my God, Mom."
He said, "They gave me an anesthetic and fought. He's out." He said, "I wasn't out." I can still remember they're opening up my skull. I swore to myself, anytime I collide with a player, he's going to the hospital.
March 31st, 1928, in the no-frills town of Floral, Saskatchewan, Gordie was born the 6th of 9 children to Catherine and Albert Howe. From day one, he faced hardship.
It was damn poor. We had nothing, couldn't get nothing, and we did with what we had. If you had 2 pair of socks, you were one of the lucky kids. And if you had a winter coat, you were luckier still.
Like most Canadian boys, Howe played hockey on the frozen ponds that dotted the Saskatchewan farmland.
We picked up horse turds off the road and used those for pucks, and we called those road apples. And if nobody brought a puck, we played with these road apples.
He came out to play, and he had his mother's skates. They were quite big on him at that time, but he used his mother's skates for a whole season.
I think on the weekends I would play, I bet you 20 hours of hockey. And the game would go from early morning to late night. And you'd play, and when you're hungry, you'd go home.
Hockey for him was the great liberation because he was not a boy who did well at school. He actually failed grade 3 twice.
I remember going to a church, and it made me get up and read. And I didn't like that. I was very shy and to get up and so I stopped going there in a hurry.
He would hear the kids call him doughhead. Gordie took sanctuary from these kinds of insults with his mom.
He was terribly heartbroken, you know, and I guess she just grabbed him and they both had a nice cry.
His father, Ab, who at other times had called him backward and bashful and awkward and clumsy, said to him, "Gordie, don't take no dirt from nobody. You know, because if you do, they'll just keep putting it on top of you."
In 1943, Gordie was invited to the New York Rangers training camp in Winnipeg. On his first trip away from home, the gangling 15-year-old delivered himself and not much else.
You go to get your uniform, and I only had my skates. So I walked in and he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "Everything." And he said, "What position do you play?" And I said, "Everyone."
He didn't know what it was like to put on a pair of shoulder pads. He was in with the other boys, and he just dropped the equipment at his feet, and he watched another lad across the dressing room put on his equipment piece by piece, and he copied him.
The Rangers were not particularly impressed. A year later, the Red Wings took a chance and signed Howe to a minor league contract. Then in 1946, he became the NHL's youngest player at 18.
When Howe joined the team, all he wanted, he didn't even care for a bonus. He just wanted a Red Wing jacket.
He did score a goal in his first game, but it was a long time before he got another one, and he was doing a lot of fighting, and he was picking some of the real heavyweights of the league to fight with.
Gordie was told by Adam, if you get in a fight, you're going to be fined $5. We don't want you in the penalty box. We know you can beat them. Don't take a penalty.
Howe matured quickly, rounding out Detroit's famed production line, a three-man force that finished 1-2-3 in NHL scoring in 1950. But while his line mates, Sid Abel and Ted Lindsay, celebrated the Stanley Cup down on the ice, Howe watched unfulfilled from the stands. In 1951, a fully recovered Howe began an unprecedented era of domination, scoring 43 goals and winning the first of 6 NHL scoring titles. The next season, while winning MVP, he led the Red Wings to a second Stanley Cup in 3 years, beating the Montreal Canadiens.
People either admired or disliked Gordie Howe. If Gordie Howe was going in to play the Boston Bruins, they didn't like him, but he brought people to the building, and they filled the building to watch him play.
I remember I get the call. They said they want you to come and meet Gordie Howe. And I remember Gordie Howe pulled in a big white limousine, and I remember standing there as he got out of the car, and I was just in awe. He was bigger and better and nicer than I ever imagined.
I didn't really know what I wanted to be until I met Gordie Howe, and he shook my hand. From that point on, I wanted to be a hockey player.
If he carried clout with the fans, Gordie Howe had little to say in the upper reaches of the NHL, where absolute authority went unchallenged.
They looked on the owners and coaches like a religious man would look upon God. And you did whatever they asked you to do, and you never argued about the money.
If you popped off in the dressing room, criticized the coach or the manager, chances are you'd be in the American League the following week.
They said that they would give us for $5 a stitch every time you get cut. I remember getting cut a few times, and I said to the doctor, "How many stitches have I got?" And he says, "You got 5." I says, "Well, put 4 more in, okay, will you?"
With such traditional labor management relations falling apart in 1957, the Red Wings' Ted Lindsay and the Canadiens' Doug Harvey secretly attempted to form the NHL's first players' union.
I recognized that this had to be. We had to have a voice. We had the key players on every team of the 6 teams. We were into this meeting.
Jack Adams comes in, he says, "What are you guys doing?" Ted says, "We're not going out on the ice until Mr. Campbell talks to us about the union." Teddy said, "Who wants the association or union?" Everybody stand up. We all stood up, except one guy, Gordie Howe. Gordie says, "Mr. Adams treats me good. He gave me 2 jackets this year, you know. He didn't have to do that." Ted Lindsay stood up and says, "I'll buy you 5 jackets. Don't worry about a jacket."
Gordie Howe, with the reputation that he had, he could have been a great asset in forming this union and getting a little bit more for us.
He felt really torn between the two. Gordie wasn't an activist. If anything, Gordie was a bit of a pacifist. He just wanted to play hockey. He didn't want to get involved in the politics of the game.
I was so happy just to play the game, and I thought they were fair. Jack Adams, he says, son, you had a great year last year, so this year I'm going to give you an extra $1,000. I didn't argue.
Gordie was the best player in the game at that time. It's never been written that the best player should be the biggest force off the ice.
The NHL Players Union wasn't successfully organized until 1967.
I'm sure Theodore Lindsay still believes that if Gordie had stood up in that meeting in the dressing room at Olympia and said, well, let's go for it and see what happens, things might have changed.
We'd have been successful in negotiating with the owners to get what they owed us, and he has to live with that the rest of his life.
In July of 1957, Lindsay was traded to Chicago, spelling the end of the Red Wings' labor problems. Over the next decade, Howe began to see the owners in a colder light.
The biggest disappointment was when they said I was the best paid player on our team and probably in the league. Then I found 3 guys on our team. One was making almost twice as much. That hurts.
There were players who would come into Jack Adams in those days, and they'd say, Jack, I feel that, I had a heck of a season last year. Don't you think I deserve a little more money this one? And Jack's standard answer was, hey, do you know that Gordie Howe is only making this much money? That would put you over him. You can't do that.
Gordie was a very naive young man. He believed everybody. He just took Mr. Adams for his word.
From 1966 to 1969, the Red Wings were 14 games under 500, even though Howe remained among the league's top 5 scorers each season.
Ladies and gentlemen, number 9, Gordie Howe.
In 1971, at age 43, he retired, making no statements critical of ownership. Gordie said he simply had enough. When we return, Mr. Hockey, now retired, finds life away from the ice unbearable.
SportsCentury's 50 Greatest Athletes is presented by Seville STS with all the power and technology of the North Star system. It's What's Next. Also brought to you by MasterCard. There are some things money can't buy. For everything else, there's MasterCard. By Nike and by Budweiser. Now is the perfect time to enjoy a brewery fresh, Beechwood-aged Budweiser.
For 14 years, I played against and with the greatest of us all and enjoyed every high-sticking minute of it.
In 1973, a year after Howe's Detroit number was retired, he returned to the ice to play alongside his 2 sons on the Houston Aeros of the World Hockey Association at the age of 45.
Here comes Gordie Howe back into the new league. Is this a publicity stunt or something? I'm thinking to myself, because Gordie can't play like he did, 10, 15 years ago.
A lot of people felt that, why is he doing this? Can't he retire gracefully? He's not going to be able to impact the game. He's too old. He's been out of it too long. He's lucky if he'll get 5 or 8 goals.
So Marty, what position do you play?
I play left defense.
Okay, and Mark?
I play left wing.
They better get used to this position, too, and I'll be leaning on them.
I was scared to death. He's coming into the WHA, and the quickest way for somebody like yourself to make a reputation for yourself is to go out and fight Gordie Howe.
One player was on top of Mark and giving him a couple of shots. Gordie went over to the player, tapped him on the shoulder, and said, "Get up." The player wouldn't get up. So Gordie took his fingers, put it in the player's nostrils, and lifted him off Mark Howe.
Howe played 4 seasons with Houston, winning WHA championships in 1974 and 75. He then played 2 more years with New England and became the first player to score 1,000 career goals.
McKenzie with a rebound in front of Gordie Howe. He scores! Gordie Howe is 1,000th goal!
I looked at him, and you notice the shades of gray on my head? He had the same shades of gray. And I said to him, how can you still be playing at this age? And he laughed. He said, I'm going to play a lot longer.
He said, I got the love of the game back playing with my boys. He got his life back because for him, hockey was life.
After the WHA died in 1979, Gordie kept the flame alive another year with the Hartford Whalers, winning a spot on the NHL's All-Star team.
Takes it away from Watson, centers to Cloutier, scores! Cloutier, set up by Gordie Howe.
On the day of his 52nd birthday, he was on his farewell tour around the National Hockey League. And the Los Angeles Kings had an enforcer, a goon, named Jean-Paul Kelly. Kelly came all the way across the ice from nowhere near him and checked him into the boards, over the boards, and into the stands. Howe got out of the stands, came back on the ice, rushed right into the action, and assisted on a goal within 30 seconds. Later in the game, his educated elbows found a piece of Kelly along the way. After the game, the television broadcaster was questioning Gordie Howe and said to him, "How did you feel?" And Gordie Howe, at age 52, said, "Go ask Kelly how he felt."
When Howe retired for what he termed his second and final time, not everyone was convinced it was over.
When he retired at 52, I said to myself, well, he probably is this time, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Even when he went into a scouting capacity with the Hartford Whalers, he'd have the equipment in the trunk of his car in case they invited him on the ice.
At different stages, I asked myself why Gordie would come back. The first time when he came back in the early 70s with the World Hockey Association, I felt, and I still believe, that he just felt he had more hockey to play. After that, I really think that as Wayne Gretzky matured and started to dominate the sport and Gordie saw his records disappearing, that Gordie wanted to leave some kind of legacy that Wayne could never touch.
Howe invented that by playing one shift for the Detroit Vipers of the IHL in 1997. He was now the first player to compete in 6 decades, but not everybody applauded.
When he came back to that one shift just to appear in another decade of his life, a lot of purists were offended by it.
I don't think anybody was very happy with that one. I think that it was more of a circus act. What was there to gain? Of all the greatness of Gordie, that one passed the line.
I just hope that we've seen the end of that sort of thing and let Gordie's image remain as untarnished as they can keep it.
Number 9, Gordie Howe.
Over time, Gordie Howe's image has emerged intact, untarnished, unforgettable. He remains Mr. Hockey now and forever.
Anytime Gordie would come to a game and, they would announce that he was in the building, I mean, forget it. We could just score a goal and it didn't matter. If Gordie's in the building, it's a standing ovation.
Today, he's what, as I say, he's 71 years old. He's probably as competitive now as he ever was. If he can't play hockey anymore, he's competitive playing golf. Or if he's playing gin rummy with you, I guess he's competitive. Because that's ingrained in those kind of people.
Have you ever shaken hands with Gordie Howe? It's not a pussy willow type of handshake. They admire him because he symbolized one thing in the game of hockey. He was tough, he was resolute, and he gave better than he took.
In many respects, Gordie Howe was the Hank Aaron of hockey. He played the whole game, starred well beyond his prime, and never scored 50 goals in a season. But for all of Howe's commonality with Aaron, history likens him more to Ruth. Why? Because like Ruth, he became the symbol of the sport. He is Mr. Hockey, then, now, and always. For SportsCentury's 50 Greatest Athletes, I'm Dan Patrick.
This has been a presentation of ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports. For more, log on to ESPN.com, a part of the Go Network. Go.com.